Good day, everybody. I don't know what time of day it is for you or where you are, but it's Jim Norris from Backstage Insider. And we're very lucky today to have two esteemed gentlemen, Marc Jordan, singer, songwriter, author, musician, and Don Breithaupt, well, he does all those things as well and is also an author. So we'll be talking about Mark's story and then about the relatively new book that's come out on Mark. So, Mark, first, starting out, I just want to talk about your very early beginnings, your family life, and if your family was musical and if that was an influence.
Big fan. My dad was a singer, and he had a career in New York, and but he was a socialist, and so his career kind of ended like literally overnight, and he was blacklisted, and so he came to Canada, and I was I grew up though I was born in Brooklyn, I grew up really in Canada.
Excellent. So there was definitely a propensity towards music, and I find most of the people I've interviewed for this series have had that. Um, with the exception, I believe, of Andy Kim. He said his parents weren't interested in music in any way, but he was kind of the exception. So, how did you first get started in playing and writing songs?
Well, I could always play by ear, and my brothers, because of my dyslexia, I struggle to read music, so I developed my ear, and when my brothers were busy learning their pieces note by note, music, I'd listen to them, uh, you know, s- practicing, and then I could go and play the pieces after I could just play them.
Right.
And so it made them very angry. But, anyway, so it started there, and, I got yeah, I I was interested in classical music. I s I for a while and, um, played classical guitar for a minute, and then I heard Bob Dylan, and that was a game changer for me.
Wow.
'Cause
And
here was a guy who played guitar, not
yeah,
even as good as I did, but and he wasn't really a great singer, but man, what a writer, eh?
yeah, I was going to say that would be the main influence there, I guess, was his songwriting,
Unbelievable.
which was incredible. So, was that in Montreal that you were in those days?
No, we were in Toronto.
In
But
Toronto, okay.
yeah,
And then what was your first, band experience?
horrible. Uh, Let me think. I became well, I was in a cover band called, it was a guy named Bill Cudmore, and it was called Wicked William, and, that we, traveled all over, Ontario and in New York State and stuff, and we played cover tunes, but it was it was really good to do that because I learned to play s songs that were on the radio, and then we backed up Bobby V, who, who who was an amazing guy. He was like a bubblegum guy, like a rubber ball come bouncing back to you. It was one of his big hits.
Right.
But, he was actually a really good writer, and backstage, he would play us his songs, and they were really good.
Wow.
And I remember saying to him, why the hell are you playing, like a rubber ball when you could be playing these?" And he said, "My audience doesn't wanna hear it."
Huh.
So that was a that was profound.
Excellent. Yeah, I read about Bobby V. That was an interesting one. In my early musician days, we backed up actually Bobby Sherman many, many years ago,
Yeah.
which was quite an experience. Um, so how did the experience in the cover bands, how did that develop into your career as a professional songwriter, I guess you could call it?
Well, I guess anytime you're doing something on a professional level, you have to be prepared. You have to learn what you have to learn, and you have to be good. And for a young performer, anytime you're on stage is time well spent because you learn. There's a lot to learn about just being on stage.
Right. So how did you get connected to all the artists that you wrote songs for? Because obviously in your list of artists that have recorded your material, it's pretty impressive.
Well, I eventually went to LA, moved to LA, and I got a wonderful publisher there, Warner Chappell, and specifically a a girl named Judy Stakey, woman, and she understood that I was not a typical uh, songwriter that a publisher would hire.
Right.
Oh, and she figured out that I I I couldn't really write for people. That all I could do, like there are songwriters that if whoever is looking, for a song, they can go, yeah, and they can do that. But I didn't have that skill. I could only write what came out of my head.
Right.
And so she understood that, and she just said, just write songs. And that's what I did. And then she took those songs and she thought, well, who would that be good for? It might be good for
Right.
this person. Might be good. And that's how it got started.
I think that way, the way you did it has a lot more integrity than writing, something for a specific artist. The fact that you wrote that song and then she could figure out who it
It's
would.
just a different skill.
Yeah.
You know,
But
it
she was obviously very good at matching your songs with potential artists.
no, she was wonderful.
Yeah, which is great because there's some great matchings there, that's for sure. So, the song, "Living in Marina Del Rey," was that before this time or during your time down there, or
That was the first song that I wrote when I went down there. Literally on the way from the airport, the first time I was there to the hotel, we passed a sign that said, "Next exit Marina Del Rey," and I
right.
man, what a and that I don't know, it just stuck with me.
Yeah,
And,
I always remember
oh
that song.
yeah,
We used to well, we still do attend the NAMM show every year, and we used to fly into LA and then leave from there, and it was a habit every time that we would have our dinner in Marina Del Rey, we would
oh,
just go down the highway and eat right on the water,
yeah,
and I always remember that, such an incredible place,
yeah.
uh, atmosphere and tone and everything else. So, you've done some production as well in your career?
Well, I've taken credit for production,
Oh, okay.
you know? I'm not s I wouldn't say I'm really a producer. I can co-produce,
Right,
but I need help, and, but I can produce in that I know sort of orally what works,
right.
you know, and what doesn't. Okay,
Excellent.
I'm not good at the technical stuff.
Yeah, well, it's changed so much in the last 20 years, it's
Yeah.
daunting to say the least. So with your, busy life that you have had and still do, um, how have you balanced family life and your career? And especially, owing to the fact that you're married to Amy Sky, who's a successful artist as well, and you've got a couple of kids. How have you balanced that over the years?
I ignored my family.
I asked Jason
Spent
McCoy that.
all my time on myself.
I asked Jason McCoy that, and he said it was a train wreck, is basically how he put it.
Yeah.
But well,
No, it all
I
worked
guess no, I guess the good thing is Amy was busy anyway. I mean, she wasn't just sitting around waiting at home for you.
out. And I worked at home, I mean, I wasn't on the road that much.
Right, right. That's true enough.
Oh,
And as far as any up and coming songwriters that might be watching this that are just getting started in their career, what kind of advice would you have for them? What should they do to become successful and get their songs recorded?
I don't know. The only thing I know is that you have to write. The mechanics of it changes every decade. So the constant is that you have to write the best song you can and the truest song that you can, and you have to learn to not chase trends, I suppose,
Right,
and just to write, because if you write something that means something to you, then it will connect with a lot of other people. If you're
right.
creating something you think is gonna connect, well, might or might not. You never know. But
Yeah,
if it's true to you, there's a lot of other people just kinda like you on the planet, and
right.
that's
For
that's
sure.
how that could be nonsense, but, that's how I look at it.
Great. And as far as your, we're going to talk about the book in a minute, but aside from that, what are your plans for the future? What other things do you want to accomplish in the next 10 years?
Uh, I just wanna keep making music.
Great.
That's really
Yeah. Retirement is
make
heavily,
sure my kids are happy, that's all.
that's great. So the came to the time in your life where you thought a book would be a good idea, get your story out there. How did you
I
get,
didn't.
you didn't? Did
Don did.
Don force you into it, or how did that whole thing
Well,
maybe
I think Don, mentioned it to me.
okay.
I think it came didn't it, Don?
Well, we've told about 8 different versions of this origin story, but,
Okay.
uh, I know that, Mark at the time was not sort of philosophically opposed to now's the time to tell my story, uh, and because Mark is dyslexic, he's not the candidate to write his own book,
Right.
but he's a great raconteur and remembers his whole career in great detail. And so we started with a whole bunch of interviews, uh, sort of where I pieced together the parts of his story that I didn't already know. And then I went out into the wider world of music and I got to talk to, people that have recorded Mark's songs or have produced them or been music executives that worked with him, and filled in the blanks with those people, including David Foster and Rod Stewart and some really big names.
Excellent. So just to diverge here slightly, Don, what's in 30 seconds or less, what's your background as a artist, songwriter, and then as a writer?
Well, I do some of the same things as Mark. I mean, I've got my own original Monkey House project, Juno nominated and so on. And I've written songs for Manhattan Transfer and Chicago, and so Mark and I have that in common as well. But I'm also trained as a writer, and so have written uh, music books for. I wrote one on Steely Dan for the 33 and a third series, and wrote a couple for St. Martin's Press in New York about pop music in the 70s. And so I had already hung out my shingle as a writer, and so I guess convinced Mark that I was one.
And did you actually know each other before that all happened?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had already been writing songs together, and we had done some gigs together, and of course, both being in the circle had about 1,000 people in common, you know.
Well, well, that's great. So I don't think most people know how much work it is writing a book. I think they think that it's easy, and just talk about that for a minute. Just the work involved and all the research and deciding on the content and all the rest of it, but then getting it all in a publishable form. It's a lot of work.
Oh, that was a breeze.
Was it?
Don't listen to him.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was it by the time I finished the initial round of interviews with Mark, I mean, I had something in the hundreds of thousands of words once it
Yeah.
had all been transcribed. And I kept, I guess, the most interesting or authentic or original or funny, parts and strung it together chronologically. Because certainly when we were talking to each other, we weren't going chronologically. We were skipping around to this year and that record deal and Toronto and LA and, but anyway,
I
it
don't know
all
how
got
to put this together. I'm telling you.
I
That
I will say that when I went out and sort of did all the third-party interviews, it helped stitch together the story. Like Judy Stakey, who Mark alluded to earlier, spoke to us for the book, for example, and gave me some insight into that period of Mark being a sort of pro songwriter and how he was slightly quirky and not like her other clientele who were mercenaries who could write a Tina Turner song in 25 minutes.
Right. Right. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Uh, so the book's been out, I think, what, a few months?
Yeah, since late December, I guess we did what they call a soft release just
Right.
before Christmas, and then sort of started promoting in earnest in January.
Right. Okay, good. And the actual name of the book?
It's Rhythm of My Heart, the authorized biography of Marc Jordan, which I presume to call it before Mark had actually authorized it.
Okay. All right. Um, yeah, and is it available other than Amazon? I noticed on Amazon it's available in paperback and Kindle format.
And Kindle, yeah, and we have an audiobook version on the way as well.
Oh, okay.
I think most of our sales at this point have been through Amazon, but there are lots of other people carrying it. I spoke to somebody today down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who had got his copy through Barnes and Noble. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's around.
Okay. Oh, good. So it is in traditional bookstores as well. What's
Yes,
left?
and
What's left of them?
if your traditional bookstore doesn't have it, they can get it pretty quickly.
And who would they get that from?
They would be ordering it through the same channel that Amazon would.
Okay. Okay.
Same distribution.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And of course, if any of the readers goes to Amazon and just puts in either your name or Mark's, that works because I tried both. So the book's
It
easy to
should
find.
come up. Yeah, if or by the same token, if they type rhythm of my heart into a book search that on Amazon or really anywhere, it'll come up.
Oh, good, excellent. Because
Yeah.
Amazon's pretty good platform to publish on. I've helped a couple of people with that recently, and it's reasonably friendly, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, they want you to do well because then they do well. So
Yeah, for sure. Oh, they're pretty.
yeah.
Mr. Bezos is pretty rich, so he must be doing something right. So any other comments before we wind it up today?
Mark.
Oh, I'm comments. Well, I'm still working with Rod Stewart, and I'm working on his new record with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this book is a nice sort of tour through the music industry as well as being Mark's story. It's, we're going through some pretty heady places and high level offices and studios over the years in this story. And That's fun. And then you have the other arc, which is Mark starting out as somebody who stymied by dyslexia as a kid, who figures out somehow to be a wordsmith and a writer, up against that, and sort of turning his neurodivergence, I guess, into a little bit of a creative superpower.
Excellent. Yeah, in a lot of biographies that I've read, there's usually a lesson in there as well as to, what made the person successful and how those industries work, depending on what it is they're interested in. So there's a lot of value in, for an upcoming songwriter to buy Mark's book would make a lot of sense because it would give you a good idea of the the path and the hardships and how to become successful. So it becomes a how-to book as well, I think, which is good.
Yeah, and I think that if there is a sort of how-to lesson in there, it's what Mark said earlier, that if you write something authentic or that means something to you, it's got a better chance of getting through to somebody than something you kind of aimed for the middle of the road or this kind of success target that other people were already exploiting.
For sure.
It's a for such a collaborative art form, yeah, it's a very solitary thing sometimes that we do, and you're kind of in a room uh and forced to just trust your gut and go forward with what you've come up with creatively, no matter how on the surface quirky or different it might be. And that takes a certain amount of courage, and Mark's got that in spades, and that's why his stuff has always stuck out and connected.
That's for sure. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate your time, and I'll certainly let you know when this is live. It won't take too long. And all the best, both you in your careers and with the book.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Excellent.